In only about 15 minutes, I'm going to be teaching you what you need to know about Python user input through 5 different examples. We're going to start very basic by taking in someone's name, adding a little bit of complexity with casting our input, whether it's an integer or a float, looking at evaluating input, and we're going to finish off this video with a while loop example where we continuously take in user input until a user wants to exit the while loop. You guys are going to learn a ton, so let's start coding. All right, so let's get started. So what we're going to do is first take input for a variable called runner. And actually, before I do that, let me set up this as example one, and simple input string. That way I stay organized and you guys can have your code organized as well as you follow along this tutorial. All right, so let's create a variable called runner. And inside we're going to have it take an input. So all you have to do is put input. You put the parentheses over here like this. And then inside with quotes, I'm just going to say enter your name, right? And it's going to be like this. Now, before I do run this, I'm going to create one more line and we're going to create a print statement. So we'll say print, and I'm going to do an F string. Now, if you aren't familiar with F strings, they're pretty basic. I do have a full video on them, so make sure to check that out. But anyways, all we do is put inside this print statement F, then quotes like this. I'm going to say hello. And inside over here, I'm going to say runner, which is our variable that we put above over here, right? Where we're taking input. And I'm going to say like this, good luck with your 100-mile ultra marathon. And start this. So all I'm going to do is run this cell over here. And it's going to take a second just because I didn't have Google Colab running. And it says enter your name. So I'm going to put Ryan right over here. And in my next line, it says, hello, Ryan. Good luck with your 100-mile ultramarathon. And yeah, I'm running 100 miles later this year. That's going to be a fun challenge. But awesome, right? And you can run this again. And let's put my last name. Let's say put Nolan over here. And I rerun this. Hello, Nolan. Good luck with your 100-mile ultramarathon. So essentially, in just 2 lines of code, we can enter in a name. Right? We take in input. This inputs as a string, assigns it to this runner variable, and we can say print hello. And inside over here, we have the curly brackets, which is our runner variable. Throw that in there. Good luck with your 100-mile ultra marathon, just like that. Now, here's the thing. This by default is a string. What happens if you want to take in input as like an integer or a float? So example number 2 is going to be casting. So example 2, cast as an integer. All right, and let's get started with that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put over here and say miles equals, and first thing we're going to do is we're going to put int, because this will cast whatever we put in for the input as an int. So then we put in our input in over here, and we're going to say enter miles. I'm going to say whole numbers only, because I'm casting as an int. An int is a whole number, whereas a float has decimals. So that's why I just put whole numbers only, okay? So run that over here if we want to, enter in miles 10. And actually I should put a space over here just for formatting purposes, and we'll rerun that in a second. But I'm going to convert the miles into kilometers. So we'll say km equals miles times, and I looked this up also, but 1.60934. I did not know the exact amounts. I just figured in general about 3.1 miles is a 5K. So I always just use that calculation in my head if I have to convert for races. But that's the exact number. And I'm going to do one more line. And I'll say print. We're going to use an F string again. And we're going to say the distance. I'll say miles. In miles is, and we'll put km. I don't know if this is grammatically correct or not, but let's do this. So let's put in something over here. Miles, we'll say 8 miles. So and we'll convert this. Km equals miles times 1.6. Technically, I could just do this a lot easier, but I just wanted to show you guys the distance in 8. The distance 8, not in miles. It should just be 8 miles is kilometers. There we go. You run that. The distance 8 miles is 12.87472 kilometers. And obviously you could round this, you can make this a lot prettier, but this is just a basic video on taking in user inputs. All right, so now let's take a look at casting as a float. So casting as float with user input, and I'm going to change where I cast. The first one I casted right here. Next one I'm going to cast outside of that, just to show you. I've seen it both ways, an example code. So let's do that. First thing what we'll do is we'll have an input over here. We'll say miles equals, and then input enter miles. We don't need to have whole numbers only since we're going to do a float. So you set up your miles here. Let's say I ran 11 or 13.1, which is a half marathon. Okay. And then down below, we're going to say distance equals floats. We'll put miles like that. And we'll write one more line. So print f string you ran, and I put distance miles today. Right, so let's run this one more time. Right, I put miles here, 13.1. Now I convert this into float, and then I ran 13.1 miles today. Let's say I decided to run another time later in the day, right? So I'm going to say total miles equals, or distance plus 5, right? And if I just print out total miles, you'll see that we have 18.1, right? But if I just did miles over here plus 5, this isn't going to work. So if I just show you this, miles, just do miles plus 5, right? We get an error because it is a string, not a float or an int, and we can't add 5 to it. So that is why we cast. Okay, awesome. Now let's take a look at this next example, which is eval. So we'll say miles, let's say eval example. We'll say miles ran equals eval, and eval can just do some quick math, which is nice. So in this case, input, and let's say we want to have a runner add in their miles for the week. So we'll say add in the miles you ran this week. And if I run that, let's say I did 5 plus 11 plus 7 plus 3. And these are not my actual miles. I ran a lot more than that, but let's just say that is, right? And we can go to this miles ran and check it out. We have 26, which coincidentally enough is almost a marathon. You need 2/10 more of a mile. But regardless, that's how you can essentially use eval. And I think it's pretty nice. But we can take eval a step farther. And I personally would prefer if we go through a while loop, right? So let's do that example. And that's going to be our last example for this video also. And I do have another video on validation of user input, which will be coming out shortly after this, which we're going to expand on some of these different examples. So make sure to stay tuned for that. So let's start off this example. We'll say example while loop. Okay. And the first thing I want to do is set our total distance. So we'll say total distance equals 0.0. Right. And we'll run that and we will get going. So down below, we're going to do while true, and we'll say distance string equals inputs. Over here, we're going to say enter the distances you ran this week. All right. And in this next line down below, I'm going to say distance equals floats, and over here. I kind of just like it spaced out. Again, feel free to make this one line if you want. Then I'm going to say total distance, which is this variable that I set up over here, is going to be plus equal to distance, right? So we're going to add in our distance every time while this is still true. We're going to say print, put an F string, and so you ran distance so far. Okay. Your total, well, let's say you ran distance today. We'll assume like someone just runs it each time. Or this time. I don't know. I'm just change this up a little bit. This time. Your total distance is, and we'll just put total distance. So that way we plug in this example, right? And since entered the distance you ran, I'm going to just change it out of this week. So enter in the distance you ran. We're going to add into the total distance you ran distance. Your total distance is, I guess I should check this before starting the video, but regardless, we're going to set up something called continue running down below. And this is going to be equal to an input. Do you want to add another run? And we can take an input from user once again. So we can say like yes or no, which is y and n. And we can set up this if statement. So if continue running dot lower, and the reason why we use a lower is if someone puts a capital Y, we're going to have this in lowercase, is not equal to y like this, we are going to break. And that stops our for loop, or stops our while loop, not our for loop. And just like this, we have a pretty cool input program. So we have total distance ran, right? And let's make sure this works properly. Let me actually get my distances that I ran this week so far. And I think it'd be kind of fun to do. So here's my distances minus my sprints that I need to do today. I'll just let Garmin load. All right, so the first day I ran 6 miles, which was a tempo run for me. So my total distance is 6. I added my next run. Then I did an easy run, which was 9. Okay. Oh, I messed that up already. Let's restart this. All right, so my first run is 6. I guess I got to restart this in general. All right, let me stop this and let's go. So total distance is 0. We should be started. All right, so my first run this week was 6 miles. I want to continue to add more. Yes, my second run was 9 miles. This was an easy run. So I'm up to 15. I want to add in another run over here. Then I split up 2 runs in one day. The first run was 4 miles. So I'm at 19. I want to add in another one. The next one was 7 miles. Okay. I'm at 26. I want to add in another one. The next day I ran 7.1 in the morning. So 7.1. I want to add in one more run. And on Friday before work, I ran 17.4 miles. So we'll put that in over here. I'm at 50.5. So we'll put N, because I did not run yet this weekend. I still have a speed day today. And lastly, if we want to print out that total distance, so you can say print F string over here. Great job. Great job. You ran a total of, and we'll just put our total distance here. Total distance this week in miles. And great job. I ran 50.5 this week in miles. Obviously, the grammar didn't make sense there. You ran a total of miles this week. That sounds better. There we go. Yeah, I mean, I need to add to this still, which I'll do right after this video, but I needed to hit about 55 miles and I should be able to clear that. So one more time, just going through this video really quick. How this works is we're going to be taking an input in over here, right? And you assign it to a variable. Your input on this side of things is always going to be a string. So if you want to have this as a number, you either cast it to an integer or a float. You can do this through ints like this or floats. Sometimes you see it in one line, sometimes you see it broken up. I kind of prefer it broken up for readability. You can also use eval on top of this, and you can just literally put a formula as the input, and then it evaluates it, and you can get a total like that. What I did in this example over here. Where I see this very commonly used is within while loops. You can build out a program like I did over here with this distance running tracker. So essentially I could have someone put in miles each time they run in a week, sum those up, and then you see the total here at the end. So all I did is while true, which will default a while loop. The reason why we want to have a while loop is it continuously runs, whereas a for loop runs a certain amount of times. Technically running, you could run more than 7 times in a week. Some pro runners run 2 or 3 times a day. So that's why I elected to use a while loop rather than a for loop that you could add up to 7 runs, right? Plus, also, some people may run only 3 times a week or 2 times a week. So you have that flexibility where a for loop is rigid. Regardless, right, we take in the string for distance, then we convert it to a float over here. We add into this total distance, which we defaulted to 0 at the beginning. Then we set up a way to break out of the while loop, which is again to be another input. So we can set this input over here to y or n. If it's a lowercase, if it's not y, then we break it. So that is inputs. Again, I'm going to have an input validation video really soon. Hope you guys enjoyed this Python user input video. If you did, make sure to subscribe to the channel. This is just one video in a full series that I'm developing of Python tutorials. I have a few other videos linked down below in the description and a playlist right over here. But I highly recommend you check out user input validation, which is going to be the next video in this series.